"Don't cry, Mum, we'll lend you our father," said the prince's twins to the woman crying alone. "Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from." Madeline told herself she had chosen the farthest bench for a reason. Not because it was prettier, not because it was quiet, because people did not look twice at a woman who sat still and kept her hands folded, as if she were only waiting for someone who might arrive at any moment. But no one was coming. The rain fell in thin, persistent lines, and the gardens were almost empty. A few umbrellas moved like dark sails between the trees. A coach rolled past at a careful pace, the wheels softened by wet gravel. Somewhere a bell marked the hour, and Madeline counted it without meaning to, as if the sound could become a form of payment. Her fingers pressed the edge of her worn glove until the seam dug into her skin. "Do not cry," she ordered herself. Crying made the body swell, the eyes redden, the face betray the truth. And truth lately was a luxury. She had come out with one purpose: to think, quickly and clearly, about what she could sell without selling her dignity. To decide which neighbor might lend her a few francs without requiring the kind of gratitude that lasted longer than money. And yet she sat there, defeated by a simple thing, the shape of a name, Fournier. It still felt like it belonged to someone else. She tried to steady her breath, but her chest tightened anyway. She lowered her chin. She let the rain hide what she could not stop. "Ma'am?" The voice was small, careful, polite. Madeline did not lift her head. She pretended not to hear. She could not afford to be seen by strangers, not in mourning, not alone, not trembling on a public bench as if she had nowhere else to go. "Ma'am," the voice repeated closer now, "please do not be offended. We only wish to speak." There were two voices, she realized, nearly identical, one slightly firmer than the other. Madeline forced herself to look up. Two little girls stood before her, perhaps 8 years old. They were dressed with a neatness that suggested a household that never ran out of clean linen. Their cloaks were buttoned to the throat. Their gloves were dry, as if the rain had been ordered to avoid them. Their faces were alike in a way that made people pause. The same clear gaze, the same tidy curls tucked under matching hats, the same calm, as if they had practiced it. One of them held a small parasol, absurdly determined against the rain. The other held her hands together, as if she were about to recite something at church. Madeline's throat tightened again, but this time with surprise. "Children," she said, keeping her voice low, "you should not be speaking to strangers." "We have already spoken," the one with folded hands replied, as if correcting a mistake in arithmetic. The parasol girl nodded. "And you are crying." Madeline gave a stiff little smile. "Rain has a way of getting into one's eyes." "No," the parasol girl said. Not rude, simply certain. "That is not rain." Madeline's fingers searched for her handkerchief. She dabbed at her cheek, too late to pretend. The folded hands girl stepped a half-pace closer. "We do not like it when ladies cry alone." "I am not alone," Madeline lied, glancing around as if expecting someone. The girls followed her glance. The path was empty. The parasol girl tilted her head. "You are alone." Madeline's patience, already worn thin by the morning, rose like a brittle shield. "Where is your governess?" The folded hands girl pointed behind them. "Our governess is not here." Madeline's eyes widened. "Then where is your nurse? Your footman? Our father," the parasol girl said, as if that answered everything. Madeline let out a breath she had not meant to release. "Children, you cannot wander without supervision." "We are supervised," the folded hands girl said, and her serious face softened just a little. "By Providence." Madeline almost laughed. It came out as a shaky exhale. The parasol girl leaned forward, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. "Do not cry, ma'am. We will lend you our father." Madeline stared at her. The world seemed to stop for a single beat, as if even the rain had paused to hear the audacity. "Your father," Madeline repeated. "Yes," the girl said brightly, as if speaking of lending a book. "He belongs to us, but we can share him for a little while. He is very proper. He does not smile much," the folded hands girl added, "but he does what is right." Madeline blinked. "That is not something one lends." The parasol girl considered. "It is something one offers." The folded hands girl nodded. "As Christians." Madeline's laugh tried again, and this time it escaped, small and surprised. It sounded strange in her own ears. She covered her mouth with her handkerchief at once, embarrassed. "You are very kind," she managed. "We are very decided," the parasol girl corrected. "And you are very wet," the other one observed, glancing at Madeline's damp sleeves. Madeline lowered her gaze. "I am fine." "No," the folded hands girl said gently, as if correcting a child. "You are not." Madeline's composure trembled. She turned her face away, not wanting those clear eyes to see what adults had seen and dismissed without a word. "Ma'am," the parasol girl said again, and she reached out without touching, as if asking permission with her whole posture. "Will you tell us your name?" Madeleine hesitated. Names could be doors. Doors could be opened both ways. "Madeleine," she said at last. "Madeleine Fournier." The girls exchanged a look that seemed almost satisfied. "Madeleine," the parasol girl repeated, testing the sound. "That is a very good name." "We are Celeste and Juliette," the folded hands girl said, lifting her chin a little. "We are twins." "Yes," Madeleine said, unable to keep the wonder from her voice. "I can see that." "We do not like people to stare," Juliette said at once. "We like people to listen," Celeste added. Madeleine nodded as if accepting a rule. Celeste lifted the parasol higher, though it sheltered no one properly in this rain. "If you will come with us, you may borrow our father." "Celeste!" A new voice cut through, low and sharp with restrained alarm. The twins did not flinch. They turned as one. A man approached with long, controlled steps. He held his own umbrella at an exact angle, as if the handle had been measured. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark cloth that looked expensive without looking showy. His hair was neatly kept. His face was composed in the way of a person accustomed to being observed. He stopped in front of them and looked down, his jaw set. "Juliette," he said. "Explain." Juliette clasped her hands more tightly. "We are assisting someone." The man's gaze lifted to Madeleine, and it did not wander. It landed, assessed, and stayed, as if he would not permit himself the discourtesy of pretending not to see her. Madeleine rose at once, too quickly. The world tilted for a moment, and she had to steady herself by gripping the edge of the bench. "Monsieur," she began, already preparing an apology she did not owe. "Your daughters, they are not to speak to strangers," he said, but the rebuke was directed at the girls, not at her. His voice was controlled, educated, Parisian, but with a restraint that suggested money had taught him to soften his consonants. "They were only," Celeste started. "Only choosing," Juliette added. The man's nostrils flared slightly. Then he inclined his head toward Madeleine with a formality that did not feel theatrical. "Madame," he said, "I offer my apologies. They have been given too much liberty this morning." Madeleine held her shoulders straight. "It is not your fault, monsieur. Children speak what they think. Not in public gardens to unknown women," he replied, and then seemed to realize how cold that sounded. A pause. "Forgive me. The fault is mine. I should not have let them out of sight." "They were being kind," Madeleine said before she could stop herself. The man's eyes flicked just once to the twins. Something unreadable softened at the edge of his mouth, then vanished. "Kindness can be inconvenient," he said. Juliette looked up at him, unimpressed. "Kindness is required," Celeste added. "Madeleine is crying." Madeleine's cheeks heated. She lowered her gaze. "It is nothing." The man's attention returned to her. "If you are unwell, madame." "I am not unwell. You are alone." Madeleine lifted her chin, startled by the directness. He seemed to realize he had repeated the twins' bluntness. His tone adjusted. "If you have family nearby, I can send a message. I have no family in Paris." The words came out before she could arrange them into something less revealing. She hated the honesty immediately. The man did not react with pity. His eyes remained steady. "Then you have friends." Madeleine hesitated. Friends were a word people used when they did not want to say creditor. "Yes," she said, and the lie was thin. Celeste stepped forward. "Father, we are lending you." Madeleine's breath caught. The man's eyes closed briefly, as if he were summoning patience from a distant cupboard. "Celeste," Juliette came to his rescue, "we cannot lend you if you do not agree to be lent." "I am not an object," he said. "You are a father," Juliette replied. The man looked down at her. and for a moment something like helplessness crossed his face, gone so quickly. Madeleine wondered if she had imagined it. He drew a slow breath. Then he addressed Madeleine again, more gently. "Madame Fournier," he said, and Madeleine stiffened at the sound of her name on his tongue. "My daughters are insistent. They have also been raised to believe that duty includes noticing suffering." Madeleine did not know what to do with that. It felt too personal, spoken so calmly. He continued, "If you require assistance of a practical kind, I can offer it without offense." Madeleine's pride rose like a shield again. "I do not accept alms." His brows lifted slightly. "Nor do I offer them." Celeste leaned closer to Madeleine and whispered loudly enough to be heard, "He is very proud too." Madeleine's lips pressed together, fighting a smile. The man's eyes flicked to Celeste. "That is enough." Juliette, undeterred, looked to Madeleine with grave compassion. "Our father can help you in a respectable manner. He knows respectable people." Madeleine's throat tightened again, but this time she refused to let it open into tears. "I appreciate your concern," she said, addressing the girls first because it was easier to be gentle with them. "Truly, but you do not know me. It is not safe to take strangers into one's confidence." "We are not taking you into ours," Celeste said. "We are taking you into his." "Celeste," the man warned. Juliette lifted her chin. "Father, you always say a man must act when he can act." He was silent. Madeleine watched him. Something about his stillness suggested a constant struggle between impulse and rule. His hands held the umbrella as if it were a staff of office. His gaze was steady but not unkind. She realized, with a strange twist of embarrassment, that his presence made her feel observed in a way she had not been observed in months, not with desire, with attention, with the unpleasant possibility of being taken seriously. He cleared his throat. "My name is Etienne de Valmont," he said, and the name fell into the space between them with quiet weight. Madeleine's stomach tightened. Valmont. Even she, in her smaller life, had heard it. A prince, then, not merely a gentleman with well-behaved daughters. She dipped into a curtsy that was a fraction too shallow, a fraction too stiff. "Monsieur le Prince." He inclined his head as if that title were a burden he carried daily and did not wish to show. "You need not stand in the rain to address me properly," he said. "I am not standing for you," Madeleine replied, and regretted the sharpness the moment it left her mouth. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in surprise. Then, to her horror, amusement ghosted across his face again. "Very well," he said. "You are standing for yourself." Juliette looked between them, pleased. "That is better." Celeste tugged lightly at the prince's sleeve. "Father, the lady's hands are shaking." Madeleine curled her fingers tight. "They are not." "They are," Celeste insisted, almost tender. The prince's gaze dropped to Madeleine's hands. He did not stare, yet he did not pretend not to notice either. "Madame Fournier," he said quietly, "I will not ask you to tell me your grief. That is not my right. But I can offer you a dry carriage to wherever you wish to go. Or I can send a servant with a message to someone you trust. Or you can lend yourself," Juliette said brightly, as if providing the missing solution. The prince let out a breath through his nose. "Juliette." Madeleine's heart gave a small, painful lurch at the thought of being escorted by a prince, of being seen entering a carriage belonging to Valmont. People would talk. People always talked. "I cannot," she said quickly. "I cannot accept such attention." He did not argue. He merely asked, "Why not?" Because attention was a flame, and she had learned too late how quickly it could burn. She swallowed. "Because it would not be proper." The prince's mouth tightened. "You believe I would behave improperly?" "No," Madeleine said at once. "I believe people would imagine it." His eyes held hers. The rain tapped at the umbrellas like impatient fingers. "People imagine many things," he said. "They are not always worth obeying." Juliette's eyes widened as if her father had said something daring. Celeste nodded in approval, as if she had known he would. Madeleine's pride insisted she refuse. Her body, tired and cold and hungry, whispered that refusal was a kind of vanity she could no longer afford. She chose a third option, the most modest one. "If you know someone who requires work," she said, making the sentence sound like a business inquiry and not desperation. "I would be grateful for a name." The prince's gaze sharpened. What sort of work? Respectable work, she thought. work that would not put her in the path of men who smiled too easily. She kept her voice steady. Seamstress work, mending, copying, reading aloud, if necessary. I have an education. You speak well, he observed. I read well, she answered, too quickly again. Celeste smiled. She speaks like a lady, Juliet added, and she cries like someone who has been brave too long. Madeline's eyes burned. She turned her face away, ashamed that children could see what grown women refused to acknowledge. The prince's voice lowered as if he did not want to embarrass her further. There is a position that may suit you. It is temporary. Madeline looked at him again, wary. What sort of position? He hesitated, as if weighing the propriety of the words. My daughters require a companion for their lessons, he said at last. Their governess is adequate, but she lacks warmth. Juliet made a small sound of agreement that was almost a cough. Celeste said, She is afraid of our thoughts. The prince's eyes cut to them. Enough. Then to Madeline, it would be strictly appropriate, under supervision, in daylight, within my household. Madeline's pulse stuttered. Your household? Yes. Her mind raced. To step into a noble household was to invite inspection, to invite questions, to invite the gaze of women who could smell poverty like smoke. And yet the thought of warmth, of bread, of a purpose for tomorrow, her whole body leaned toward it. She forced herself to slow her breathing. Monsieur le Prince, you do not know me. I know you are alone in the rain, he replied, and his voice softened on the last word, as if it was something he recognized too well. That simple statement threatened to undo her composure. Madeline lifted her chin. Your daughters believe they can decide the world. They often try, he said, and you indulge them. He did not deny it. It is difficult to refuse them. Their mother... He stopped. A silence fell, thin and sharp. The twins' faces changed just a little. A shadow passed, quickly mastered. Madeline's heart tightened with sudden understanding. Forgive me, she said quietly. I should not... It is no offense, he said too swiftly. It is simply not spoken of in public. Juliet took Celeste's hand. Celeste looked at Madeleine with a steadiness beyond her years. He misses her, she said simply. The prince's jaw flexed. Celeste. Celeste did not lower her eyes. You do. Madeleine felt something inside her soften, painfully. Grief recognized grief. It did not require introductions. She drew a breath. Monsieur le Prince, she said, your daughters are generous, but your generosity must not become my ruin. His brows drew together. Ruin? Madeleine forced the words out. If I step into your household, people will ask why. They will ask what I am to you. They will ask what you are to me. And what would you answer? He asked. Madeleine hesitated, then chose the simplest truth she could bear, that I am a widow, that I need work, that your daughters pitied me. The prince's gaze sharpened. Pity is not what I saw. Madeleine's breath caught. He continued before she could respond. I saw two children who refused to walk past suffering. That is not pity, it is decency, Juliet supplied promptly. Obstinacy, the prince countered. Love, Celeste said, softer than the others. The prince did not reply to that. He looked away for a fraction of a second, as if the word had landed too close to something guarded. Madeleine spoke quickly, because silence was dangerous. If you truly know of a position, she said, then perhaps you could give me the name of the person to whom I should apply. His gaze returned to her. I can, and I can go there myself, Madeleine added at once, wanting to keep the distance between them intact. He considered her. Then he gave a small, precise nod. You may. Juliet frowned. But then you will be alone again. Madeleine smiled, and this time it was genuine, though fragile. Perhaps not. I have been alone before. Celeste stepped closer. Alone is not a virtue, ma'am. Madeleine swallowed. Sometimes it is the only thing one can afford. The prince watched her as if that sentence had cost her more than she admitted. He shifted the umbrella slightly, and the movement was so practiced it felt like a habit learned from years of avoiding discomfort. You are cold, he said. I am accustomed to it, Madeleine answered. That does not make it acceptable, Juliet declared. The prince exhaled as if surrendering to a smaller, gentler defeat. Very well, he said. At least allow me to escort you to the nearest gate. The path is slick. If you fall—" "I will not fall," Madeleine said, but her voice was less firm. Celeste looked at her feet. "You already slipped once." Madeleine blinked. "You saw that?" Celeste nodded solemnly. "I saw." The prince extended his arm, not touching her, simply offering the formal support any gentleman might offer a lady in wet weather. Madeleine stared at the offered arm as if it were a challenge. If she took it, she would be admitting need. If she refused, she would be refusing sense. She chose a compromise that felt like surrender anyway. She did not take his arm. She stepped under the edge of his umbrella, close enough to be sheltered, far enough to keep propriety between them like a pane of glass. The prince adjusted the umbrella without comment. Juliet moved to his other side. Celeste stayed close to Madeleine, holding her ridiculous parasol as if it could contribute. They began walking. The gravel crunched softly. The rain hissed faintly on silk. Madeleine kept her gaze forward. She could feel the prince's attention as a presence beside her, steady and quiet. She could feel the twins' curiosity as something warmer, almost protective. After a few steps, Juliet looked up at her father. "Will you truly help her?" The prince's voice was calm. "If I can do so properly, yes." "And if society disapproves?" Juliet asked. "Then society will disapprove," he replied, as if that were not the terrifying thing it was to most people. Madeleine's throat tightened. She did not look at him. She stared at the path, at her own shoes, at the way a small puddle gathered and spread. Celeste leaned toward her. "He does not care for gossip," Madeleine murmured. "All men care for gossip." Celeste's eyes narrowed in thought. "Father cares for duty more." The prince, hearing, said, "Celeste, you should not speak as if you understand men." Celeste replied promptly, "I understand you." Madeleine's lips pressed together, fighting a smile again. The prince's tone turned dry. "That is precisely the problem." Juliet gave a satisfied little hum, as if the world had returned to its proper order. They reached the gate path. A carriage stood not far off, with a coachman holding the reins and pretending not to watch. A servant stood by, stiff and patient, the sort of man trained to be invisible until needed. Madeleine's stomach tightened again. A Valmont carriage. The sight of it alone felt like trouble. The prince did not offer it, perhaps sensing her panic. Instead, he said, "There is a household near the Rue de l'Université, Madame Lefebvre, a respectable widow who employs women for correspondence and household accounts. I have known her family for years. If I write a note—" "I can go without a note," Madeleine said quickly. His gaze held hers. "You could. And she might turn you away for lack of introduction. That would be a waste of your time." Madeleine hated that he was right. She lowered her eyes. "A note, then, if you please." The prince nodded once, as if sealing a contract. "I will have it delivered to the gatehouse this afternoon. You can collect it without entering the main residence." Madeleine looked up, startled by the consideration. "So you need not—" she began. "I do," he said simply. Juliet smiled at her father, triumphant. Celeste squeezed Madeleine's sleeve lightly, then released it at once, as if aware of boundaries even in affection. Madeleine drew a careful breath. "Thank you, Monsieur le Prince." He inclined his head again. "You are welcome, Madame." She stepped away from the umbrella, immediately feeling the rain reclaim her shoulders. The prince hesitated, then said, "Madame Fournier." "Yes." He seemed to search for the correct words. "If you require assistance beyond a reference, you may send word to the gatehouse." Madeleine's heart lurched. "I will not become a burden." His gaze was steady. "I did not say you would." Silence stretched. The twins waited solemnly as if attending a treaty. Madeleine wanted to leave quickly before her courage dissolved. She dipped into a curtsy again, better this time. "Good day." "Good day," the prince replied. Juliet and Celeste spoke together, perfectly synchronized. "Good day, Madeleine." Madeleine turned, taking 2 steps, then 3. She told herself not to look back. Yet she did, just once, because some part of her needed to see whether this had truly happened. The prince stood still with the twins at his sides, his umbrella held over them like a shield he could not help providing. Juliet looked pleased. Celeste looked intent, as if she had already decided the future and was simply waiting for it to arrive. Madeleine turned forward again, her chest aching with something dangerously close to hope. As she passed the edge of the path, her heel caught slightly, and she reached out without thinking, touching the bench behind her for balance. Her fingers brushed damp wood, and then paper. She paused, startled. Something had been tucked into the slat, sheltered from the worst of the rain. Madeleine looked down. A folded sheet pressed tight as if hidden there in haste. She should have left it. She knew she should have left it. It could be someone else's business, someone else's scandal, someone else's trouble. But her fingers moved before her caution could catch them. She pulled it free, and the paper clung for an instant to the wet wood, reluctant to surrender. She unfolded it with careful hands. Her name was written across the top in a familiar hand, sharp and slanted, and beneath it was a second name she had not heard spoken aloud in years. Madeleine's breath stopped as she read the second name. For a moment, the garden noise faded. The rain, the distant wheels, the murmur of passers-by. All of it slid away until there was only the paper in her hands and the old dread rising like water in her throat. She refolded the note quickly, as if the words might stain her fingers. A man's voice sounded behind her, too close. "You found what you were meant to find." Madeleine turned so fast her shoulder brushed the bench again. A gentleman stood a few paces away, hat brim low, coat neat, posture careful. Not a labourer, not a friend. His smile was mild, his eyes were not. "I believe you mistake me for someone else," Madeleine said. He tipped his head, almost amused. "Do I?" Her fingers tightened around the paper. "This belongs to no one I know, and yet you took it." "I took it to return it," she said, though even to her it sounded weak. He stepped no closer, but his voice lowered, intimate in a way that made her skin prickle. "You have grown cautious, Madame Fournier." The way he said her name made it feel like a joke. Madeleine lifted her chin. "If you have business, state it plainly." He made a small gesture with his gloved hand. "Plainly, then. The past is not buried. It merely learns new addresses." She swallowed. "I do not understand you." "You will," he replied. "Perhaps not today, but soon." Madeleine's pulse raced. She forced herself to look past him toward the path, toward the gate, toward any sign of the prince's party. She could still see the umbrella at a distance, the twins' small shapes at his side. The gentleman followed her glance and smiled again. "Ah, you have made an interesting acquaintance." "It is nothing," she said sharply. "Nothing often becomes something when the wrong people notice," he murmured. "You should be careful where you seek shelter." Madeleine's voice held steady through sheer will. "Who are you?" "A messenger," he said. "Nothing more. I bring reminders. I require none." He gave a quiet little laugh. "You will require money, though. Respectability is expensive." Madeleine's fingers went cold. "Say what you came to say." He looked almost pleased by her firmness. "Very well. There are questions about your late husband, about papers, about names. Do not pretend surprise, madame, you were there." "I was deceived," she snapped before she could stop herself. The gentleman's brows lifted slightly. "Were you?" Madeleine's mouth tightened. She would not argue with the stranger in the rain. "Good day," she said, turning away. "Not yet," he said softly. And then, as she took another step, "Madeleine." Her spine stiffened at the familiarity. "You left Paris once," he went on. "You returned thinking you could be invisible. But invisibility is not granted to those who owe. Do not forget that." Madeleine forced herself to keep walking. Behind her, the voice followed like a shadow. "When you are ready to be reasonable, you will receive instructions. Until then, enjoy your borrowed umbrella." Madeleine did not look back again. She walked quickly toward the gate, each step measured so she would not slip, each breath counted so she would not run. Running would draw eyes. Eyes would become stories. At the gate she paused beneath the shelter of a stone arch and opened the folded paper just enough to confirm what she already knew. Her name, and beneath it, that other name. The one that belonged to the life she had been dragged through like a torn hem. Below the names a single line had been written. "You will pay what is owed, or the truth will be delivered where you can least afford it." Madeleine's stomach turned. She crushed the paper in her fist, then forced herself to smooth it again. No, she would not be reckless. Recklessness had ruined her once. She tucked it inside her bodice, close to the place her heart would not let her forget it. Then she stepped out into the street, as if she were merely a widow running an errand. As if the world had not just tilted. By afternoon the rain had thinned to a stubborn mist, and Madeleine returned to the Valmont gatehouse the way the prince had instructed. She kept her eyes down. She kept her hands folded. She kept her grief arranged like a veil. A uniformed gatekeeper looked her over with professional neutrality. "Yes, madame? I was told there would be a note for Madame Lefebvre," Madeleine said. The man glanced at a small stack of papers. "Your name?" Madeleine hesitated a fraction too long. "Madeleine Fournier," she answered. He found the envelope. It was sealed with a crest she did not want to recognize, though she did. Valmont. Heavy paper. Confident wax. Her fingers trembled as she took it. "You may go," the gatekeeper said, already dismissing her as if she were air. Madeleine turned away quickly, clutching the note as if it were a permit to breathe. She did not open it until she reached the corner. When she did, the prince's handwriting was spare and clear. "Madame Lefebvre, I recommend Madame Madeleine Fournier to you as a woman of good conduct and education. If you have need of reliable assistance in correspondence or household accounts, you may receive her with confidence. Etienne de Valmont, no flourish, no excessive praise, just enough to open a door." Madeleine's eyes burned again, but she blinked the feeling away. Tears solved nothing. She had work to secure. She had rent to pay. She had a past trying to claw its way into the present. Madame Lefebvre's address led her to a respectable building, with clean steps and a brass plate that announced the widow's name, as if it were a small fortress. A maid admitted Madeleine and led her to a sitting room where everything looked arranged to discourage chaos. Madame Lefebvre herself entered with a brisk step. She was perhaps 50, hair neatly pinned, eyes alert. "Madame Fournier?" she asked. "Yes, madame." Madame Lefebvre took the note, read it, then studied Madeleine over the paper's edge. "Monsieur de Valmont is not a man who writes letters for strangers," she said. "I did not ask for anything improper," Madeleine replied at once. "I am not accusing you," Madame Lefebvre said, though her tone suggested she would if needed. "Tell me what you can do." Madeleine kept her voice practical. "I can copy cleanly. I can keep accounts. I can read aloud. I can write letters without errors. I can mend when necessary." Madame Lefebvre's expression did not soften. "And why do you need work?" Madeleine forced herself not to flinch at the bluntness. "Because I am alone. A husband. He is deceased." Madame Lefebvre's gaze sharpened. "How long?" 18 months, Madeleine answered, choosing a number that sounded tidy. "Family?" "Not in Paris." Madame Lefebvre walked to the window, then back. "Many widows claim skill. Few have discipline." "I have discipline," Madeleine said, then added because pride could sound like insolence, "I must." Madame Lefebvre tapped the prince's letter lightly against her palm. "This would have been more useful 2 weeks ago." Madeleine's stomach dropped. "Madame?" "I hired someone," Madame Lefebvre said without pleasure. "My niece insisted upon it. The girl is mediocre, but she is family." Madeleine's mouth went dry. "Then there is no position?" Madame Lefebvre paused as if measuring whether kindness was worth the trouble. "Not here." Madeleine stood very still. She felt the world narrowing again, like a room with the windows shut. "I understand," she said, and kept her voice from breaking by sheer stubbornness. "Thank you for receiving me." Madame Lefebvre watched her a moment longer. "You look as if you have been cornered by something more than hunger." Madeleine's fingers tightened around her reticule. "Hunger is enough." Madame Lefebvre's eyes narrowed. "If you seek the protection of grand names, take care. Grand names do not like inconvenience." "I am not seeking protection," Madeleine replied. "I am seeking work." Madame Lefebvre seemed to consider her, then spoke more quietly. "Monsieur de Valmont has daughters." Madeleine froze. Madame Lefebvre continued, almost as if testing a rumor's shape. "People speak of them. Twins, are they not? Their mother died years ago." Madeleine kept her face composed. "So I have heard." Madame Lefebvre's gaze held hers. "If you are drawn into that household, you will be watched, and if you have any irregularity in your history, it will not remain yours alone." Madeleine felt the hidden note against her bodice like a brand. "My history is my own," she said. Madame Lefebvre's expression remained unreadable. "Then guard it." Madeleine nodded once. Good day, madame. She left before her composure could betray her. Outside, the street felt too wide. The mist clung to everything, turning people into blurred shapes. Madeleine walked without direction for several minutes, as if motion could create options. Her mind kept returning to the same terrible arithmetic. No position, no money. Rent due, the threat in her bodice, and now a prince's letter that proved she had crossed paths with Valmont at all. She should never have accepted it. She turned down a quieter street, intending to return to her rooming house and face her landlady with whatever dignity she could salvage. Then she heard small footsteps behind her. Fast, determined footsteps. Madeleine! She stopped short. Two little voices called her name as if they had every right to it. She turned, and there they were, Celeste and Juliet, cloaks buttoned, hats tidy, cheeks pink with excitement. Behind them, at a controlled distance, a footman followed with a resigned expression that suggested he had already lost this battle. Madeleine's heart lurched, alarmed and oddly relieved at once. "Children," she said sharply, lowering her voice. "You must not—" "We found you," Juliet announced, as if completing a mission. Celeste held up a small paper triumphantly. "We asked at the gatehouse. They said you went to Madame Lefebvre, so we came." Madeleine's eyes widened. "You asked at the gatehouse?" Juliet nodded. "We said you were our friend." Madeleine looked past them. "Where is your father?" The footman cleared his throat with polite misery. "His Highness is at home, madame." "And he allowed this?" The footman's eyes flicked away. "His Highness did not know. They instructed me with conviction." Juliet smiled sweetly. "We are very convincing." Madeleine pressed her fingers to her temple. "This is improper." Celeste's smile fell. "Did Madame Lefebvre hire you?" Madeleine's chest tightened. She could not lie to their faces. "No." Juliet's eyes widened with outrage on her behalf. "She refused?" "She had already hired someone," Madeleine said quickly, as if protecting Madame Lefebvre from their indignation. "It is no one's fault." "It is everyone's fault," Juliet declared, then corrected herself with sudden seriousness. "Except yours." Celeste stepped closer. "Then you must come with us." Madeleine took a half-step back. "No." Juliet reached for her hand. "Yes." Madeleine pulled her hand away gently. "I cannot." Celeste's voice lowered. "You are afraid." Madeleine's mouth tightened. "I am sensible." Juliet lifted her chin. "Sensible people do not cry on benches." Madeleine flinched. Celeste softened at once. "We did not mean it harshly. We meant it truthfully," Juliet said, then added, quieter, "We do not want you to disappear." Madeleine stared at them, startled by the weight of that simple sentence. She looked at the footman, hoping for rescue. He looked back with the expression of a man who had seen this sort of determination and knew there was no stopping it without causing a scene. "Please," Celeste said, "just to the gatehouse, just to speak." "To speak with whom?" Madeleine asked, though she knew. Juliet answered promptly. "With our father." Madeleine's stomach knotted. "Your father does not wish to speak with me." Juliet frowned. "He does not know what he wishes." Celeste nodded. "We are helping him." Madeleine let out a breath, half laugh, half despair. "You are very bold." "We are very necessary," Juliet replied. Madeleine wanted to refuse again, firmly. She wanted to walk away and never let those clear eyes see her again. Children grew attached quickly, and attachments were dangerous. Attachments made people careless. But the threat note was tucked against her skin, and Madame Lefebvre's warning still rang in her ears. If Madeleine was going to be ruined by gossip anyway, she could at least try to be ruined in a way that kept her from starving. She hated that thought. She hated even more that it felt honest. "I will not enter your home," she said, choosing a boundary. "Do you understand me?" Celeste nodded solemnly. "You will not enter." Juliet added, "Not until you are invited properly." Madeleine looked to the footman. "You will escort them back?" "Yes, madame," he said quickly, relieved to have an instruction that sounded like order. Madeleine walked with them toward the Valmont gatehouse, her posture stiff, her mind racing, her heart doing something foolish and painful. At the gatehouse, the same gatekeeper looked startled to see the twins. "Mesdemoiselles," he began, alarmed. Juliet cut him off politely. "We require our father." The gatekeeper blinked. "His Highness is—" Celeste leaned forward. Tell him we found Madeleine. The gatekeeper's eyes widened, as if he understood this was trouble of the highest order. I will send word, he said. They waited under the shelter of the stone arch. Madeleine kept her hands clasped. The twins watched her face with the attentive patience of people who believed in good endings. Minutes passed. The mist thickened again. Then the prince arrived. He did not rush. He did not run. But his umbrella was slightly tilted, his coat not perfectly arranged, and his gaze went immediately to the twins with contained displeasure. Juliet, he said. Celeste. The twins spoke at once. Father. His eyes moved to Madeleine. The controlled calm in his face shifted into something sharper. Madame Fournier, he said, and the way he spoke her name sounded almost like restraint. I wrote a note for you. I did not invite you into my affairs. Madeleine lifted her chin. Nor did I invite your daughters into mine. Juliet looked up at him. We did it. Celeste nodded. We are responsible. The prince's jaw tightened. You are children. We are persons, Juliet replied. Madeleine fought a smile and failed. It flickered across her mouth before she could hide it. The prince saw it. His gaze held on her for a beat longer than necessary. You went to Madame Lefebvre, he said. Yes, and she refused you. Madeleine's cheeks heated. It is no matter, the prince's voice lowered. It is a matter if you were refused after presenting my recommendation. Madeleine forced herself to remain steady. She had already hired someone. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion of her, but in calculation. Juliet stepped forward, addressing him with formal clarity. Then you must hire her. The prince looked down at her. That is not how households function, Celeste added. It is how hearts function. The prince's expression flickered, quickly controlled. Celeste, Madeleine inhaled. Monsieur le Prince, I apologize for this intrusion. I did not ask them to find me. I believe you, he said, then added more quietly. Unfortunately, belief does not repair impropriety. Madeleine's pride rose. Then we agree. I will go. Juliet reached for Madeleine's sleeve, stopping her. Do not go. Madeleine looked down at her hand and gently removed it. I must. The prince's voice cut in, precise. Wait. Madeleine paused unwillingly. He turned slightly, indicating the sheltered corner near the gatehouse window, away from the street's curious eyes. Come here, he said, not as an order, but as a request he had trained himself to make sound like an order. Madeleine hesitated. The twins watched her as if they had already won. She stepped into the corner. The prince followed, keeping a careful distance, his umbrella angled so it covered the space without bringing them too close. You asked for work, he said. Yes. And you refused charity, he continued. Yes. His gaze held hers. Would you accept employment that is appropriate, supervised, and temporary within my household? Madeleine's stomach tightened. As what? He did not look away. As a companion for my daughter's lessons and walks. Their governess will remain. You would not be alone with them without staff nearby. There will be rules. There will be references. Your duties will be limited. Madeleine's breath came shallow. And society. His mouth tightened. Society can entertain itself with other matters. Madeleine heard her own voice, quiet and brittle. You say that now, but you live in society. Your daughters live in society. His gaze sharpened. And so do you. The truth of that landed hard. Madeleine's fingers tightened around her reticule. You do not know what you invite. The prince studied her for a moment. Do you? Madeleine's throat tightened around the hidden note against her skin. She almost said no. She almost confessed something. Instead, she chose the only safe thing. I invite nothing, she said. I only attempt to survive. His eyes softened slightly, then hardened again with decision. Survival is not shameful. Behind them, Juliet spoke loudly enough to make sure her father heard. Say yes. Celeste added, sweeter. Please. Madeleine closed her eyes briefly. Pride, hunger, fear, and a dangerous flicker of relief tangled together in her chest. She opened her eyes and forced her voice steady. If I accept, it will be for a short term, until I find another post. The prince nodded once. Agreed. And I will not be made into a spectacle, Madeleine added. His gaze held hers. You will not. Juliet clapped her hands once. then stopped herself, as if remembering decorum. Excellent. Celeste smiled at Madeleine like sunlight breaking through stubborn cloud. You will come. Madeleine swallowed. Tomorrow. I will come tomorrow. The prince turned his attention to the twins, and his voice became quietly stern. You will return home at once, and you will explain in full why you left without permission. Juliet nodded solemnly. We will, Celeste added, but you will not punish us too much. The prince's mouth tightened. That depends on your explanation. Juliet thought a moment. We were saving a lady. The prince sighed, long and controlled, then said to Madeleine, I will have my steward prepare the proper arrangement. You will be received formally, as an employee, not a guest. Madeleine nodded. Thank you. The prince inclined his head. Do not thank me yet. The first day will be difficult. Madeleine's smile was thin. Difficult is familiar. When she returned to her rooming house that evening, the landlady watched her with narrowed eyes. You've been out all day, Madame Besson said. Looking for work, I suppose? Yes, Madeleine replied, keeping her voice neutral. Madame Besson sniffed. Work does not fall from the sky. No, Madeleine said, and climbed the stairs without another word. In her small room, she took out the threatening paper again. She read it once, then folded it with trembling fingers and hid it beneath the loose board under her washstand. Her hands shook afterward. She sat on the edge of the bed until the shaking eased. Tomorrow, then, a noble household, a prince. Twins with eyes that saw too much. And somewhere, a messenger who promised the past would not stay buried. Madeleine barely slept. In the morning she dressed with meticulous care. Her morning dress was plain but clean. Her collar was properly starched. Her hair was pinned without vanity, without neglect. She looked like what she was supposed to be, a respectable widow seeking respectable employment. At Valmont, she was admitted through a service entrance, not because she was being punished, but because the prince had been wise enough to keep her from the front steps, where neighbors' eyes would measure every detail. A housekeeper with a severe bun and efficient hands greeted her. Madame Fournier, the woman said. I am Madame Renard. You will follow me? Madeleine nodded. Yes, madame. Madame Renard walked quickly. His Highness insists on clarity. Your duties will be these: morning reading, copying, supervising needlework if asked. Walks in the garden with the governess present. You will address the children as Mademoiselle unless told otherwise. You will address His Highness as Monsieur le Prince. Madeleine kept pace. Understood. And you will not speak of private matters in the household, Madame Renard added, turning her head just enough to make the warning feel sharp. I do not wish to, Madeleine replied. Madame Renard's expression did not soften, but it changed slightly, as if she had expected excuses and found none. They entered a bright schoolroom with books stacked in tidy piles. A governess stood by a writing table, thin-lipped, posture rigid. This is Mademoiselle Arnaud, Madame Renard said. She will supervise the lessons. Mademoiselle Arnaud's gaze moved over Madeleine with cool assessment. Madame Fournier, she said, voice crisp, I was informed. Please remember, the children are easily influenced. Madeleine met her gaze calmly. Yes, mademoiselle. And they require discipline, Mademoiselle Arnaud added. From behind a curtain, Juliet's voice floated out, sweet as honey and twice as sharp. We require understanding. Celeste stepped into view beside her, smiling. We require Madeleine. Madeleine's heart tightened. Good morning, mademoiselle. Juliet ran to her at once, then stopped 2 steps away as if remembering rules. Good morning. We told everyone you were coming. Celeste nodded. We told father you must be welcomed properly. Mademoiselle Arnaud looked pained. Mesdemoiselles, you will take your seats. Juliet sat, still watching Madeleine. Celeste sat, hands folded, gaze steady. Madame Renard turned to Madeleine. You will sit here, she said, indicating a chair slightly to the side. Not in the children's circle. You are not a child. You are not a guest. You are staff. Yes, madame, Madeleine said, grateful for the bluntness. Bluntness did not pretend. The morning passed in a rhythm of reading and copying. Madeleine read a short passage from a moral tale. The twins listened with unusual attention. When she finished, Juliet raised her hand, as if in a formal classroom. Madeleine hesitated. Mademoiselle Arnaud looked displeased. Yes, mademoiselle? Madeleine asked. Juliet's eyes were bright. Do you think the heroine was foolish? Mademoiselle Arnaud's mouth tightened. Juliette, we do not interrogate. We are discussing, Celeste said calmly. Madeleine chose her words carefully. I think the heroine was trusting. Juliette leaned forward. And did she deserve what happened? Madeleine's throat tightened. No, Celeste asked quieter. Even if she made a mistake? Madeleine met the child's gaze. Even then? Mademoiselle Arnaud's expression became more rigid. Madame Fournier, the lesson is obedience. Madeleine kept her voice polite. The lesson may also be mercy. Mademoiselle Arnaud stared as if mercy were a disorder. We will proceed. At noon, Madeleine was taken to a small staff dining space and given a modest meal. She ate with careful gratitude, refusing to look as hungry as she felt. Afterward, Madame Renard brought her to a sitting room that was clearly meant for receiving visitors. You will remain here until His Highness speaks with you, Madame Renard said. Madeleine's palms went damp. Is something wrong? Madame Renard's face remained controlled. His Highness prefers to meet those in his household properly. Madeleine nodded. Of course. She waited. She heard distant footsteps, low voices, then the sound of doors opening and closing. Somewhere the twins laughed, and the sound startled her with how quickly it warmed her chest. Then the door opened and Prince Etienne entered. He looked as he had in the rain, composed, exact. But today there was less surprise in his gaze and more scrutiny, as if he were measuring what his household had become with her presence in it. Madame Fournier, he said. She stood at once. Monsieur le Prince. You have begun, he said, as if confirming a fact. Yes. He studied her posture, her hands, the way she held herself as if refusing to take up space. How were the lessons, he asked. Orderly, Madeleine replied. One corner of his mouth tightened. That is not an answer. Madeleine chose honesty without drama. Your daughters are intelligent. They respond to attention more than to severity. His gaze sharpened slightly. And Mademoiselle Arnaud? Madeleine paused. She is devoted to discipline. He gave a small nod, as if that matched his private conclusion. You spoke of mercy. Madeleine's breath caught. I did not intend to undermine anyone. He held her gaze. Did you undermine? Madeleine steadied herself. I believe mercy does not undermine. It strengthens. The prince was silent for a moment. Then he said quietly, My daughters have had too much severity. Madeleine's throat tightened at the admission. He continued, voice controlled. This arrangement will continue for now. Madame Renard will handle your pay. If you require anything necessary for your work, you will ask her. Madeleine nodded. Yes, monsieur. His gaze lingered. And if you require anything necessary for yourself... Madeleine's pride flared. I require only the opportunity to earn. The prince's eyes held hers. Then he inclined his head as if accepting her boundary without approval or mockery. Very well, he said. You will be announced properly to those who visit, not as a friend, not as an amusement, as an employee. Madeleine swallowed. Thank you. He did not respond to the thanks. Instead, he said, My aunt will visit this afternoon. Madeleine's stomach tightened. Your aunt. She concerns herself with my household, he said, and the faint edge in his voice suggested the concern was not always welcome. Madeleine kept her face calm. How should I behave? The prince looked at her, as if the question mattered more than she wanted it to. With restraint, he said. With clarity. Do not volunteer your history. Madeleine's pulse jumped. I would not. Good, he replied, and turned toward the door. Before he could leave, Juliette burst in without knocking, Celeste close behind. Father, Juliette announced, you must come now. The prince's jaw tightened. Juliette, you knock. We knocked with our feet, Juliette said, then corrected herself when Celeste elbowed her gently. We forgot. Celeste spoke with solemn urgency. A carriage has arrived. The prince's gaze sharpened. My aunt. Juliette grabbed his hand. She is wearing her disapproving face. The prince's mouth tightened. She always wears her disapproving face. Celeste looked up at Madeleine. Do not be afraid. Madeleine managed a thin smile. I am not afraid. Juliette whispered, conspiratorial. If she is rude, we will stare at her until she behaves. The prince closed his eyes briefly. Juliette. Juliette looked pleased. It works sometimes. The prince opened his eyes and looked at Madeleine. Remain in the receiving room. You will be presented. Madeleine's chest tightened. Yes, monsieur. He left with the twins. Minutes later, Madame Renard returned and adjusted Madeleine's collar with quick, practiced fingers. You will not fidget, Madame Renard murmured. You will not apologize unnecessarily. You will answer only what is asked. Madeleine swallowed. Has she heard of me already? Madame Renard's expression remained careful. Madame la Comtesse hears everything. The name sent a small chill through Madeleine. A servant announced in a clear voice from the doorway, Her Excellency, the Comtesse de Brissac. The Comtesse entered like someone who believed rooms belonged to her the moment she crossed the threshold. She was elegant without softness, her posture impeccable, her gaze sharp as a pin. The prince followed behind her, calm and unreadable. The twins flanked him, their faces set in solemn determination. The Comtesse's gaze fell on Madeleine at once. And this, the Comtesse said, is the addition. The prince's tone was cool. Madame Fournier. She is assisting with the children's lessons. Madeleine dipped into a respectful curtsy. Comtesse. The Comtesse did not offer her hand. She merely sat and gestured for everyone else to arrange themselves around her as if in orbit. Fournier, she repeated. A common name. Madeleine kept her voice steady. Yes, Comtesse. The Comtesse's eyes moved over Madeleine's dress, her gloves, her collar. The inspection was silent and therefore louder than words. And you are a widow, the Comtesse said, as if stating a fact she had already confirmed. Madeleine's throat tightened. Yes, Comtesse. How long? Madeleine felt the prince's gaze on her, warning without a word. 18 months, she answered. And you have no family, the Comtesse continued. No family in Paris, Madeleine said. The Comtesse's mouth curved slightly, not in kindness. How convenient. No one to contradict you. Madame, the prince said, tone sharpening. The Comtesse lifted one hand. I am merely thorough. Our household cannot be careless. It is not an inn, Juliet's small voice cut in, perfectly polite. It is a home, the Comtesse smiled at Juliet without warmth. Homes are guarded by rules, my dear. Celeste's voice was calm. Homes are guarded by love. The Comtesse's eyes flicked to Celeste, then to the prince. You allow them to speak quite freely. The prince replied evenly. They have suffered enough silence. Madeleine's breath caught at the bluntness of that. The Comtesse turned back to Madeleine. Where were you born? In Lyon, Madeleine said. The Comtesse nodded as if checking a list. Education? A small pension school, Madeleine replied. My father insisted. The Comtesse's brows lifted. Your father. Madeleine kept her face composed. He is deceased. How unfortunate, the Comtesse said in a voice that carried no grief. And your husband? Madeleine's fingers tightened on her reticule. He is deceased as well. The Comtesse leaned back slightly. That is a great deal of death around one young woman. Madeleine's vision sharpened at the edges, but she did not look away. Death is not selective, Comtesse. Juliet made a small, approving sound that she tried to turn into a cough. The Comtesse's eyes narrowed. You speak boldly. Madeleine answered quietly. I speak truthfully. The Comtesse paused. Then she turned to the prince as if Madeleine had become furniture. Etienne, she said, using his name with the authority of family, your daughters need stability, not novelty. The prince's voice remained controlled. They need kindness. Kindness is not hired, the Comtesse replied. Celeste's eyes widened. Yes, it is. The Comtesse looked faintly startled by the audacity of a child contradicting her. Juliet added sweet as sugar, We hired Madeleine with our hearts. The prince's jaw tightened. Juliet. The Comtesse's gaze returned to Madeleine, sharper now. Tell me, Madame Fournier, why were you in the gardens alone in the rain? Madeleine's throat tightened. She could not say, because I had nowhere else to put my grief. She could not say, because I was being hunted by a name I once carried. She chose the least revealing truth. I was seeking work. The Comtesse's voice became almost gentle, which was far more dangerous than open cruelty. And you found it under an umbrella belonging to Valmont. Madeleine held steady. I found it through a letter of recommendation, written by a prince, the Comtesse said softly. For a woman, no one knows. The prince's tone sharpened. Madame, the Comtesse lifted her hand again. Do not scold me for protecting you. Scandal is not romantic, Etienne. It is tedious, it clings. Madeleine felt her cheeks heat, not with shame but with anger that had no safe place to go. The Comtesse's gaze pinned her. You will understand, Madame Fournier, that I will inquire. Madeleine kept her voice calm. You may inquire, I have nothing to hide. The words tasted like iron. The Comtesse smiled faintly, as if she had heard many people say that and had never believed a single one. We shall see, she said. The prince spoke then, his voice quiet but firm. The matter is settled. Madame Fournier is employed properly, temporarily. The Comtesse's eyes held his. Temporarily, she echoed, pleased by the word. Juliette looked alarmed. Why temporarily? Celeste added. She should remain. The prince did not look at them. Enough. The Comtesse rose. I will take my leave. I have said what duty requires. She paused at the door and looked back at Madeleine one last time. Madame Fournier, she said, voice soft as velvet, do not forget your place. Madeleine dipped her head. I do not. When the Comtesse departed, the air in the room seemed to loosen. The twins ran to Madeleine at once, stopping just short again, as if holding themselves back by force. She was rude, Juliette whispered. She was anxious, Celeste corrected, then added, rude also. The prince stood near the window, watching the carriage depart. When he turned, his face was composed, but his eyes looked tired. You answered well, he said to Madeleine. Madeleine's throat tightened. I answered carefully. He held her gaze. Carefully is wise. Juliette crossed her arms. I do not like your aunt. Juliette, the prince warned. I do not, Juliette insisted, then looked up at Madeleine. If she tries to send you away, we will protest. Madeleine managed a small smile. You must not protest. You must obey your father. Celeste's eyes narrowed with thought. We can obey and still insist. Madeleine almost laughed again. You are dangerous. Juliette looked pleased. Thank you. The prince spoke with quiet finality. Return to your lessons. The twins obeyed, but not before Celeste slipped something small into Madeleine's hand. A ribbon, pale and neatly folded. For courage, Celeste whispered. Juliette added, and so you do not disappear. Madeleine closed her fingers around it, startled by how much it warmed her palm. The afternoon continued with reading, copying, and the careful, exhausting work of being watched. Madeleine felt eyes on her in every corridor. Not hostile eyes exactly, curious eyes, measuring eyes. When the twins were dismissed for a short play period, Madeleine returned to the receiving room to sort papers Madame Renard had given her. She wrote clean copies. She kept her posture straight. She made herself small as if smallness could prevent questions. A servant entered quietly. Madame Fournier, he said, His Highness requests you step into the library for a moment. Madeleine's chest tightened. Yes. She followed him down a corridor and into a room lined with books and heavy desks. The prince stood behind a table speaking with his steward, a grey-haired man with an efficient gaze. As Madeleine entered, the steward bowed and withdrew, leaving an envelope on the desk. The prince turned toward Madeleine, but his attention did not settle on her face at once. It went to the envelope, then back to her, as if connecting two pieces that should not touch. Madame Fournier, he said, voice lower than before. This arrived with other correspondence forwarded to this house. Madeleine's fingers went cold. The prince tapped the envelope lightly. It bears your husband's name. Madeleine's breath caught. He opened the envelope with controlled precision, unfolded the contents, and his gaze sharpened as he read a stamped notice suggesting her marriage may never have been lawful. Madeleine's mouth went dry. The prince stood behind the desk, as if the paper were a report about a distant province. But his fingers tightened at the edge, and that small tension made her heart pound harder. You recognize this name, he said. Madeleine forced herself to breathe. It is my husband's. Was, he corrected, then added more carefully, You said he was deceased. He is, she said quickly. He died 18 months ago. The prince's gaze lifted. Then why are official notices still pursuing him? Madeleine's fingers curled against her skirt. She could not answer without opening a door she had kept nailed shut. I do not know, she said, and hated how thin it sounded. The prince's voice stayed even. This notice refers to a prior identity. Madeleine's throat tightened. He had Business matters. A prior identity, he repeated slower now. Not a business matter. A person. Madeleine's pulse raced. She could feel the shape of the threatening note under her washstand, as if it were here in the room, watching. She kept her chin lifted. Monsieur le Prince, I did not bring these papers to your door. No, he said, and the word carried no accusation, only fact. But they have arrived. He set the notice down and picked up a second sheet. His brow furrowed. This is a request, he said. A request? Madeleine echoed, her voice too tight. A formal inquiry, he corrected, eyes scanning. Asking whether anyone at this address has knowledge of Monsieur Fournier's former dealings and legal status. Madeleine's knees almost softened. She held herself upright by will alone. I have never lived here, she said quickly. Only since yesterday. This is a mistake. The prince's gaze did not move. The forwarding suggests otherwise. Mail was redirected. Madeleine swallowed. From where? He looked at a line on the paper. From your previous residence. Her stomach dropped. How would they? The prince's expression sharpened. Who is they? Madame Fournier. Madeleine's mouth opened, then closed. She could not name the messenger in the garden. She could not describe him without admitting she had been marked. And if she admitted she was marked, she could not control what happened next. So she chose a safer truth. I had debts after my husband's death, she said. Not my debts, his. I received notices, I changed addresses. The prince studied her for a long moment. You did not mention any of this, he said. Madeleine's voice came out brittle. Would it have helped me to mention it? A pause. Then he spoke more quietly. No. The admission loosened something in her chest and tightened something else. She forced herself to keep her tone practical. Tell them I have no knowledge. Tell them to pursue the matter through proper channels. The prince tapped the notice once. They are pursuing it through proper channels? Madeleine's fingers went cold. Then why send it to you? His gaze held hers. Perhaps they assume the name Valmont will produce cooperation. Madeleine's heart sank. I did not ask for your name, she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The prince's voice remained controlled. Neither did my daughters, and yet here we are. Madeleine lifted her chin, anger flaring like a match to keep her from trembling. If you regret employing me, release me. I will go. The prince's eyes narrowed slightly. I did not say I regret it. You will, Madeleine said, too quickly, then softened it with effort. Monsieur le Prince, your aunt already doubts me. Now this arrives, it will become a story. And stories do not require proof. He watched her as if measuring whether she was about to run. Sit, he said. Madeleine hesitated. His tone did not rise, but it left no room. Sit, madame. She sat in the nearest chair, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. The prince leaned forward slightly, palms flat on the desk. I will respond. I will state what is true. That you have been employed only recently, that I have no knowledge of your husband's affairs, that any inquiry should be directed to the correct civil registry. Madeleine's breath caught. You would do that? It is the correct procedure, he replied. That is not what I meant. The prince's gaze remained steady. I will not permit my household to become a convenient target. Madeleine's throat tightened, but she refused to let gratitude turn into tears. I will keep out of your way, she said quickly. I will be invisible. That is impossible, he said. Madeleine blinked. Impossible. He nodded once toward the door, toward the sounds of the house. My daughters have eyes. Madeleine's fingers tightened. Children grow tired of people. His voice stayed calm. These do not. A knock sounded at the door. The steward returned, careful and quiet. Your Highness, the steward said, eyes flicking to Madeleine and away again. There is a gentleman at the front who requests a word. He says it concerns an inquiry. Madeleine's pulse jolted. The prince's jaw tightened. Name? He gave it as Monsieur Lenoir, the steward replied. He presented a card. Madeleine's breath stopped. The prince noticed. His gaze snapped to her face. You know him. Madeleine forced herself to speak. I have heard the name. The prince's voice turned colder. From whom? From letters, she said, too fast, then steadied. From notices, demands. I do not know if it is the same man. The prince held her gaze, then spoke to the steward. Receive him in the front parlour, tell him I will come. The steward bowed and withdrew. Madeleine stood at once. Monsieur le Prince, you will not instruct me in my own house, he said, not harshly but with finality. Madeleine's cheeks heated. Forgive me. I only mean, if he speaks to you, then your name is attached. The prince's expression hardened. My name is already attached. They wrote to this address. Madeleine's hands shook. She clasped them behind her back. Then let me leave. Immediately. Today. The prince's gaze cut to her. No. No? She echoed, stunned. You will not be questioned alone, he said. Not in my household. Madeleine's voice dropped. You think I would lie? I think others will twist what you say, he replied. That is different. A moment passed. The prince moved around the desk. You will remain here, he said. Madame Renard will stay with you. You will not speak with Monsieur Lenoir unless I am present. Madeleine's stomach tightened. That is unnecessary. The prince looked at her as if she were stubborn for sport. It is necessary. He opened the door and spoke to a servant in the corridor. Bring Madame Renard to the library. Then he looked back at Madeleine. Do you understand? Madeleine forced herself to nod. Yes, he left. The silence he left behind pressed on her. Madeleine paced one small line in front of the chair, then stopped, then started again, as if movement could keep panic from showing. Madame Renard arrived with brisk steps. Madame Fournier, she said, eyes sharp. His Highness says you are to remain. Madeleine's voice shook despite her effort. There is a gentleman. He asks questions about my husband. Madame Renard's mouth tightened. Questions come to this house often, usually about money or reputation. Madeleine flinched. Madame Renard's gaze softened just a fraction. Do not tremble. Trembling invites suspicion. Madeleine forced her shoulders back. I am not trembling. Madame Renard raised a brow. Of course not. They waited. Minutes passed. Then the door opened again. The prince returned, and behind him came the sense of another presence even before the man stepped into the library. Monsieur Lenoir was not old, not young. He dressed like a man who wished to appear respectable without belonging to the best circles. His coat was well cut but not new. His hair was tidy. His eyes were alert in a way that made Madeleine feel pinned. He bowed to the prince. Your Highness, forgive the intrusion. The prince's voice was cool. State your business. Monsieur Lenoir produced a folder with careful hands. I am tasked with clarifying certain matters related to a deceased man known as Paul Fournier. Madeleine's stomach clenched at the sound of the name, spoken with such easy certainty. The prince did not glance at her. Go on. Monsieur Lenoir's gaze flicked briefly to Madeleine, as if confirming she was exactly where he expected her to be. The movement was small. It was enough. Certain documents suggest Monsieur Fournier may have used an alternate name, Lenoir continued. There are discrepancies in parish records. The prince's voice remained level. And you bring this to me because? Because, Lenoir said smoothly. My superiors believe the household of Valmont values civic cooperation. When an inquiry meets silence in lesser quarters, it seeks better doors. The prince's jaw tightened. You are here because you could not find what you wanted elsewhere. Lenoir smiled with polite humility. I am here because your door is known to open for duty. Madame Renard made a small sound of disapproval. The prince did not take the bait. What do you want? Lenoir opened the folder and removed a sheet. Confirmation of Madame Fournier's marriage. Madeleine's breath caught. The prince's gaze snapped to Lenoir. That is not my concern. With respect, Lenoir replied. It becomes your concern if Madame Fournier resides under your roof. The prince's voice turned icy. She is employed, that is all. Lenoir held up the paper. Then perhaps you will permit a simple statement. The date of the marriage, the parish, the witnesses. Madeleine's mouth went dry. Her mind raced. The date, the parish, the name written in ink that might not have been real. The man she had believed in, smiling, promising safety, promising legality. The prince's voice cut in. You will address inquiries of marriage to the civil registry. Lenoir inclined his head. We did. And that is precisely why I am here. The registry has, how shall I say, uncertainties. Madeleine felt the room tilt. The prince's eyes narrowed. Uncertainties. Lenoir's tone remained gentle. A prior entry appears for a man matching Monsieur Fournier's description, under a different name. A marriage recorded years before. If that marriage was never dissolved, he let the sentence trail, not cruelly, but as if savoring the power of implication. Madame Renard's face tightened. Madeleine heard her own voice, thin and furious. "You enjoy this?" Lenoir turned his gaze on her fully now. "Madame, I enjoy clarity." "You enjoy fear," Madeleine replied, then caught herself. She looked at the prince, ashamed. The prince's voice remained controlled, but there was steel beneath it. "Monsieur Lenoir, you will not interrogate my employee in my library." Lenoir bowed slightly. "As you wish, Your Highness. Then I will leave my notice. If Madame Fournier is willing, she may appear tomorrow at the bureau to give a statement. If she is unwilling—" He shrugged lightly. "Then the inquiry continues through other means. Letters, witnesses. It becomes public." Madeleine's fingers clenched. The prince held out his hand. "The notice." Lenoir placed it on the desk with care. Then, as if remembering manners too late, he added, "My apologies for distress." The prince did not respond. Lenoir bowed again and withdrew with the same measured steps with which he had entered. When the door closed, silence landed hard. Madame Renard exhaled sharply. "Vultures," she muttered, then stiffened as if embarrassed by the word. The prince did not move at once. He stared at the notice as if it were an insult. Madeleine's voice came out rough. "You see now. I must go." The prince looked up. "No." Madeleine's throat tightened. "Monsieur le Prince, please. Your daughters—" "My daughters are not fragile ornaments," he said, and the sharpness in his tone startled her. Then he steadied himself. "They have already lost their mother. I will not let them lose every person they attach to simply because society becomes curious." Madeleine swallowed hard. "Attachment is not a reason to gamble with their future." The prince's gaze held hers. "Then tell me what I am gambling." Madeleine's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The prince's voice dropped. "You said your husband's debts were his, not yours, and yet a man comes here demanding to question you about marriage records. Why? Precisely. Why?" Madeleine's hands trembled. She clasped them. "Because my husband lied." "That is not enough," the prince said. Madeleine's voice rose, then broke. "It is enough for me." The prince's jaw tightened. "Madame Fournier." She flinched at the firmness of it. He spoke more quietly. "I will not pry into grief, but I will pry into danger. My daughters are involved now, whether you like it or not." Madeleine's eyes burned. Madame Renard cleared her throat. "Your Highness, shall I—" The prince didn't look away from Madeleine. "Leave us." Madame Renard hesitated, then bowed and left, closing the door softly. Madeleine stood alone with him. The prince moved around the desk slowly, as if not wishing to crowd her. He stopped at a careful distance. "Sit," he said again, but this time it sounded like gentleness disguised. Madeleine shook her head. "If I sit, I will collapse." "Then stand," he replied. "But speak." Madeleine's laugh escaped, small and bitter. "Speak what? The truth that shames me? The truth that makes your aunt's suspicions look wise?" The prince's gaze did not flinch. "I am not concerned with my aunt's satisfaction." Madeleine's voice shook. "You should be," he replied simply. "I am concerned with my daughters." The reminder struck her like a bell. Madeleine closed her eyes for a moment. She breathed in, then out, then in again. When she opened her eyes, she made herself speak with the same calm she used in the schoolroom. "I believed my marriage was lawful," she said. "I believed I was protected by it." The prince's jaw tightened slightly. "And now you believe it was not." Madeleine swallowed. "I began to suspect when the notices came. When I saw his papers after he died, there were letters I had never seen, names I did not recognize." The prince's gaze sharpened. "Did you go to the registry?" Madeleine hesitated. "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" he asked, though his eyes suggested he already knew. Madeleine's voice dropped. "Afraid I would find out I had no right to call myself a widow." Silence. The prince's face went very still. Madeleine forced herself to continue. "If he was married before, if that marriage still existed, then mine—" Her throat closed. She swallowed hard. Then mine was not a marriage. The prince's voice was quiet, careful. So you lived as husband and wife. I lived as his wife, Madeleine corrected, pain flashing. He lived as he pleased. A pause. Then the prince said, "You did not know." Madeleine's laugh was small and sharp. "Does society care what I knew?" The prince did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. Madeleine's eyes burned. She forced herself to keep the tears from falling, because if she started, she feared she would never stop. "I cannot stay," she whispered. "If the inquiry becomes public, your daughters will hear whispers. They will see glances. They will be taught to judge a woman for a deception done to her." The prince's expression tightened. "And you will disappear into the rain again." Madeleine's breath hitched at the memory of the bench, the umbrella, the impossible kindness. "Yes," she said, "I will." The prince stepped closer by a single pace, still not near enough to touch. "And what will that solve?" "It will remove me from your house," she said. "That is enough." The prince's voice dropped. "No." Madeleine lifted her chin, despair turning into anger because anger was easier to hold. "You cannot decide this for me," he replied evenly, "and you cannot decide this for my daughters without telling me the truth." Madeleine's hands clenched. "I told you." "You told me suspicion," he said. "Not proof, not names, not dates. You are protecting someone." Madeleine flinched. "I am protecting myself." The prince's gaze held hers, then softened slightly. "Then let me protect you properly, through law, through records, through clarity." Madeleine's throat tightened again. "Clarity will ruin me." The prince's eyes narrowed. "Clarity is the only thing that can save you." Madeleine shook her head. "Save me? Monsieur le Prince, you speak as if I belong to your concern." His voice came out lower. "You belong to my household now. That makes you my concern." The words sent a strange heat through her chest, immediately chased by fear. She stepped back a fraction. "Your aunt will not accept that. Society will not accept it." The prince's expression hardened. "Let me handle society." Madeleine's voice rose, urgent. "You cannot handle a story once it begins." The prince was silent for a beat. Then he said, "You are not the only one with a past, madame." Madeleine stared at him, startled. He did not explain. He only added, "And I have learned that hiding does not make it disappear." Madeleine's breath caught. The intimacy of that admission felt dangerous. Outside the library, the house murmured with ordinary life. A servant's footstep, a distant door, the muffled laughter of the twins as if innocence could keep the world away. Madeleine's eyes stung. "They will be blamed for this," she whispered, "for bringing me here." The prince's gaze sharpened. "No one will blame them while I can speak." "And if your aunt tries," Madeleine said quickly, "she will twist it. She will say I encouraged them. She will say I used their grief to enter your home." The prince's jaw tightened. "My aunt may be severe, but she is not without conscience." Madeleine's laugh was small. "Conscience is often quiet when reputation speaks." He held her gaze. "Then I will speak louder." The boldness of that statement made her chest tighten in a way she did not trust. Madeleine turned away abruptly, as if her own heart had become embarrassing. "I packed last night," she confessed, voice low. "After the Comtesse left. I knew she would return with questions. I knew she would not stop." The prince's voice stayed steady. "And you did not leave?" "Because of the twins," Madeleine admitted, and the words felt like surrender. The prince's tone softened. "They care for you." Madeleine's shoulders shook once. She steadied herself. "They barely know me." "They know enough," he replied. "They know you did not dismiss them. They know you looked at them as if they mattered." Madeleine swallowed. "Children attached to anyone who listens." The prince's voice turned quiet, almost fierce. "Do you think listening is nothing?" Madeleine did not answer because her throat would not allow it. The prince picked up the notice again. "You will not go alone to that bureau tomorrow." Madeleine turned back sharply. "Then you will come with me?" He hesitated just a fraction. "I will send my counsel, and I will request the records myself." Madeleine's heart sank. "That will make it worse." "It will make it correct," he replied. Madeleine's voice dropped to a whisper. "If the records prove what I fear, then what? What will you do?" The prince's eyes held hers. "Then we will know the truth." "That is not an answer," she said, tears finally spilling despite her effort. The prince's expression shifted, something tightening in him as if he hated tears because he knew what they cost. He did not touch her, but his voice softened. "Madame Fournier," he said, "I will not allow anyone to humiliate you in my house." Madeleine wiped her cheek quickly, furious at herself. "Humiliation does not ask permission," the prince replied. "Then we will refuse it." A knock at the door made Madeleine flinch. The prince's face closed again into composure. "Come." The door opened, and Juliette peered in, eyes wide. "Father," she said, breathless, "Aunt Hélène is speaking with Madame Renard." Céleste appeared behind her. "She is asking questions." The prince's jaw tightened. "What questions?" Juliette's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "About Madeleine's husband." Madeleine's stomach plunged. Céleste's gaze fixed on Madeleine, solemn and steady. "She says, a respectable house cannot keep a mystery." Madeleine's hands went cold. She looked at the prince. "You see?" The prince's eyes hardened. "I will handle it." Juliette stepped fully into the room, forgetting rules. "She said if you do not send Madeleine away, she will invite people to visit more often." Céleste added quietly, "So they can look." Madeleine swallowed hard, shame rising like heat. The prince's voice went cold. "Go to your schoolroom." Juliette hesitated. "But—" "Go," he repeated. The twins looked at Madeleine, then obeyed reluctantly. When the door closed again, Madeleine's breath came fast. "I must leave before she returns," she said. The prince's gaze held hers. "You will not run because my aunt disapproves." "I am not running from disapproval," Madeleine snapped, then softened at once. "I am running from ruin." The prince's jaw tightened. "Ruin comes faster when you flee." Madeleine's eyes flashed. "Then let it come. At least it will not come with your daughters attached." She turned toward the door. The prince stepped into her path, not blocking her with force, only with presence. "Madame Fournier," he said, voice low, "if you leave now, my daughters will believe kindness is punished." Madeleine froze. He continued quietly, "They will believe attachment is dangerous. They will close their hearts. Is that what you want?" Madeleine's throat tightened until it hurt. "No," she whispered. "Then stay," he said. Madeleine shook her head, desperate. "You ask me to stay while my name becomes a weapon in your aunt's hand." The prince's eyes held hers. "Then tell me the full truth, so I can disarm it." Madeleine stared at him. Her whole body trembled now. There was no dignity left in pretending. She drew a shaky breath. "There was another name," she said. The prince's gaze sharpened. "Whose?" "His," Madeleine whispered. "My husband's. Or the man I called my husband." The prince's voice was barely above a murmur. "What name?" Madeleine swallowed, then said it. The name that had been written beneath hers on the note at the bench. The name that had followed her like a shadow. The prince went still. "That name," he said quietly, "is tied to an old matter." Madeleine's breath caught. "You know it. I know of it," he corrected, eyes narrowing. "A financial fraud that harmed several families, including—" He stopped. Madeleine's stomach turned. "Including yours." The prince did not deny it. His face was controlled, but his eyes were sharp with something like anger, not at her but at the web tightening around them. Madeleine's voice broke. "I did not know, I swear it. I did not know he had done such things. I thought he was merely careless. I thought his debts were ordinary." The prince's gaze held hers. "And now someone is pushing you toward my house." Madeleine whispered, "Yes." A silence fell. Then the prince said very softly, "If this is true, then someone will try to use you to reach my daughters." Madeleine's eyes widened. "No, no, I would never—" "I know," he said, and the certainty in that one word almost undid her. Madeleine's tears fell again, silent and furious. "Then let me go before they can." The prince's voice hardened. "No." Madeleine stared at him. "Why?" He spoke with controlled intensity. "Because you will not be sacrificed to protect my name. And my daughters will not be taught to abandon people when trouble appears." Madeleine's breath shook. "Monsieur le Prince." He held her gaze, and for a moment the room felt too small for what was being decided inside it. Then, from the corridor beyond the library door, a soft creak sounded like a foot shifting on polished wood. and Madeleine saw the shadow of someone retreating. The shadow in the corridor vanished so quickly Madeleine might have doubted it if her nerves had not been sharpened by fear. She stared at the closed library door. The prince did not move at once. His gaze remained on the place where the shadow had been, as if he could will it to return and identify itself. Someone heard, Madeleine whispered. Yes, he said. Her stomach clenched. Your aunt. Perhaps, he replied. Madeleine took a step back. Then I must go now. The prince's voice turned low and firm. No, sit. She shook her head. You cannot command my shame to remain in your house. His jaw tightened. I can command my house. Madeleine's chest rose too fast. Monsieur le Prince, please. He crossed to the bell pull and rang once. Then he faced her again, his composure locked into place. You will not leave until I know who stood outside that door, he said. And if it was a servant, Madeleine snapped, then caught herself lowering her tone. They will tell your aunt. He watched her a moment. Then we will speak to my aunt with truth, not panic. The door opened. Madame Renard entered, eyes sharp. Your Highness. The prince did not soften his tone. Who was in the corridor? Madame Renard blinked. In the corridor? Now, he said. Madame Renard's gaze flicked to Madeleine, then back. Her mouth tightened. A footman, Your Highness. Pierre. I sent him to fetch a ledger. Bring him, the prince said. Madame Renard hesitated. Your Highness, if he merely passed. Bring him, he repeated. Madame Renard left at once. Madeleine's hands shook. She hid them by clasping them behind her back. The prince's voice lowered, meant only for her. You will not be treated as a criminal here. Madeleine's laugh came out tight. I already am. I can feel it. Eyes, whispers, questions. I will stop them, he said. You cannot stop an idea once it escapes, she replied. His gaze held hers. Then we will replace it with a better one. The door opened again. Pierre entered with Madame Renard. He was young, pale, sweating despite the cool air. He bowed too quickly. Your Highness. The prince's voice was calm, almost gentle, which frightened Pierre more than anger would have. You stood outside this door, the prince said. Pierre swallowed. I was passing, Your Highness. The prince tilted his head slightly. And you heard. Pierre's eyes dropped. I heard a name. Madame Renard's mouth tightened. Pierre. The prince's gaze did not leave Pierre. To whom did you repeat it? Pierre's hands trembled. To no one, Your Highness, I swear it. The prince's voice became colder. Pierre flinched. Madame la Comtesse asked questions earlier. She asked who had been summoned to the library. I said nothing improper, only that there were papers. Madeleine felt the room sway. You told her there were papers, she whispered. Pierre's eyes darted to her, ashamed. She has a way of asking that makes silence feel like disobedience. The prince's jaw tightened. Did you speak the name? Pierre shook his head quickly. No, Your Highness, I did not dare. The prince held him in silence for a moment, then said, You will return to your duties. You will not speak of what you heard. If you are questioned, you will direct the question to Madame Renard. Pierre bowed again, hurried, relieved, and left. Madame Renard remained, posture stiff. The prince's voice stayed controlled. My aunt is already circling. Madame Renard gave a small nod. She will not stop. Then we will not wait, the prince said. He turned to Madeleine. You will answer no more questions today. Madeleine's throat tightened. But, no, he said. You have done enough. Madame Renard looked between them. Your Highness, shall I remove Madame Fournier from the schoolroom until matters settle? Madeleine's pride flared. I will not hide. The prince's gaze softened slightly. You will not hide. But you will be protected from unnecessary cruelty. Madeleine whispered. Cruelty is often called concern. He did not deny it. He only said, Madame Renard, bring Maître Caron at once. Madame Renard's eyes widened. Your counsel? Yes, the prince replied. Madame Renard bowed and left. Madeleine stood very still. You are involving lawyers for my sake. For the truth, he corrected. And for my daughter's. Madeleine's voice dropped. Your aunt will say I have trapped you in scandal. The prince's eyes sharpened. My aunt will say many things. She is not my conscience. Madeleine swallowed hard. then forced herself to speak with the steadiness she used when reading aloud. Monsieur le Prince, if the records prove my marriage invalid, I will leave Paris. The prince's voice was immediate. No, Madeleine blinked. You cannot forbid it. I can refuse to allow you to ruin yourself out of shame, he replied. Shame is not a choice, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then I will give you another feeling to hold on to. Madeleine's chest tightened painfully. Do not. His jaw flexed, as if he were restraining words that threatened to step too far. The door opened again and a servant announced, Maître Caron. A man entered in a sober coat carrying a leather folder. He bowed to the prince, then offered a polite nod to Madeleine without lingering. Your Highness, he said. The prince spoke with brisk clarity. Maître Caron, this concerns an inquiry into a deceased man known as Paul Fournier and an attempt to question Madame Fournier regarding the legality of her marriage. Maître Caron looked to Madeleine. Madame. Madeleine's throat tightened. She forced herself to return the greeting. Sir. Maître Caron opened his folder. I understand Monsieur Lenoir has appeared. He has, the prince said. He implied a prior marriage under a different name. Maître Caron's expression remained composed. Then we request records properly, immediately. Madeleine whispered, and if they are worse than we fear. Maître Caron answered her without softness, but not without respect. Then we find out what is true, madam. It is always better to be ruined by fact than by rumor. Madeleine flinched. The prince's voice cut in. No one will be ruined. Maître Caron did not contradict a prince. He only said, we will begin with the civil registry, parish registers, and any notarized documents. Also the inquiry itself. Monsieur Lenoir will be required to show authority, not hints. The prince nodded. Do it. Maître Caron hesitated a fraction, then asked, Madame Fournier, do you consent to provide me with every paper you possess related to your marriage? Madeleine's mouth went dry. Consent felt like surrender, but she knew refusal would look like guilt. Yes, she said. Everything. The prince looked at her sharply. You kept papers. Madeleine lowered her eyes. Only what I could not afford to discard. He did not push. He simply said, You will bring them to Maître Caron this evening. Madame Renard will accompany you home and back. Madeleine's cheeks heated. That is unnecessary. The prince replied, It is necessary. Maître Caron closed his folder. I will request an appointment with Monsieur Lenoir tomorrow. In the meantime, Your Highness, I advise you to limit access to Madame Fournier. The prince's voice was cool. My aunt will not enjoy that. Maître Caron gave a neutral expression that could have been sympathy. Then your aunt will not enjoy it. When Maître Caron left, Madeleine remained standing as if the chair were a trap. The prince turned to her. You will return to the schoolroom. The girls must not sense panic. Madeleine swallowed. They sense everything. Then let them sense steadiness, he replied. She nodded, though her knees felt unsteady beneath her. In the schoolroom, Juliette and Celeste looked up the moment she entered. Their faces changed at once. Something happened, Juliette said. Madeleine forced a small smile. Lessons continue. Celeste's eyes narrowed. Did Monsieur Lenoir come? Madeleine froze. Mademoiselle Arnaud looked up sharply. Mademoiselle, what is the meaning of that name? Juliette blinked, innocent. We heard it. Madeleine kept her voice calm. A man asked questions about paperwork. Nothing for children. We are not infants, Juliette replied. Celeste leaned forward. Are you leaving? Madeleine's chest tightened. She wanted to lie. She wanted to promise what she could not control. She chose careful truth. Not today. Juliette's shoulders loosened. Good. Mademoiselle Arnaud stiffened. This is not appropriate conversation. Celeste replied politely, We will be appropriate when we are reassured. Madeleine sat at her assigned chair and opened the book as if the world had not shifted beneath her feet. That evening, Madame Renard escorted Madeleine back to her rooming house with brisk steps and watchful eyes. Madeleine retrieved her small bundle of papers from the loose board. A marriage certificate copy, a few letters, receipts, a page with a name written twice in different inks. Madame Renard did not touch them. She only said, You kept evidence. I kept fragments, Madeleine replied. Evidence is for people who are believed. Madame Renard's mouth tightened. Do not speak as if belief is impossible. Madeleine looked at her, surprised. Madame Renard's tone remained severe. His Highness is not a man who enjoys inconvenience. If he is choosing it, it is not whim. Madeleine's throat tightened again. Then he will regret it. Madame Renard's eyes flashed. Perhaps you should stop deciding what he will feel. Madeleine had no answer. They returned to Valmont and delivered the papers to Maître Caron, who accepted them with precise care. The next day passed in a tight, polite tension. The Comtesse arrived again earlier than expected, her posture sharper, her gaze colder. Madeleine was not in the receiving room this time. The prince had instructed her to remain with the children. Yet, even in the schoolroom, she could hear the Comtesse's voice in the distance, calm and cutting. Juliette slammed her pencil down. She is arguing. Celeste listened, head tilted. Father is calm. Juliette's eyes widened. He is calm when he is most angry. Madeleine tried to keep her voice steady. Your father is handling adult matters. Juliette looked at her. Adult matters always become children's matters. Celeste reached across the table and placed her small hand over Madeleine's fingers, briefly, gently. Then she withdrew as if she knew she had broken a rule and dared not do it twice. Madeleine swallowed hard and continued the lesson. Later that afternoon, Madame Renard appeared at the schoolroom door. Madame Fournier, she said, His Highness requests you. Madeleine rose slowly, heart pounding. Juliette stood too. We are coming. Madame Renard opened her mouth to object, then closed it. Very well. Walk properly. The twins flanked Madeleine like small guardians. In the library, the prince stood with Maître Caron. The Comtesse sat rigidly in a chair, gloved hands folded, expression displeased. Monsieur Lenoir stood near the door, posture respectful, eyes alert. Madeleine's stomach clenched at the sight of him. Lenoir's gaze flicked over her, then to the twins. His smile was polite, too polite. The prince spoke before anyone else could. Mesdemoiselles, you will sit and remain silent. Juliette sat, chin high, as if her silence would be an act of defiance. Celeste sat, eyes steady, listening. The Comtesse's gaze pinned Madeleine. So the mystery returns. The prince's voice was cold. My aunt will address Madame Fournier with respect. The Comtesse lifted her chin. Respect is earned. Maître Caron spoke smoothly, or extended Madame when no proof of wrongdoing exists. Lenoir cleared his throat. I have no desire to offend. My duty is to clarify. The prince's gaze turned to him. Then clarify with facts. Maître Caron opened a folder and removed documents. We have requested civil records. We have also obtained notarized confirmations regarding the identity of the deceased man known as Paul Fournier. Lenoir's polite mask tightened slightly. That was swift. The law can move, Maître Caron replied, when a prince asks it to. Madeleine's cheeks heated with a mix of shame and relief. Maître Caron continued, voice crisp. The records indicate the man who married Madeleine Fournier used a false identity and presented falsified documents. A prior marriage exists under his true name, not dissolved at the time of Madeleine's ceremony. The Comtesse made a small sound, satisfied and horrified at once. There! Madeleine's chest tightened until it hurt. Maître Caron raised a hand slightly. However, these same records and testimonies confirm that Madame Fournier was deceived. She did not sign under false names. She did not profit from the fraud. She is recorded as a victim in the matter. Lenoir's brows lifted. Victim is a generous word. Maître Caron's tone sharpened. It is the accurate word. The prince's voice came low. Meaning what, Maître Caron? Maître Caron looked at Madeleine with professional calm. Meaning the law does not view her as an accomplice. It views her as a woman misled into an invalid union. Her honor in society is a separate cruelty, not a legal conclusion. Madeleine's throat tightened. She forced herself to breathe. The Comtesse leaned forward, eyes sharp. Separate cruelty is still cruelty. People will not call her widow. They will call her... The prince cut in, icy. My aunt will not finish that sentence in my house. Silence snapped tight. Juliette's small hand slid toward Madeleine's under the edge of the chair. Celeste mirrored her, and both girls held Madeleine as if anchoring her. Madeleine blinked hard. Lenoir spoke carefully. Then my inquiry concludes regarding criminal involvement. Yet the matter of public record remains. I will file my report. The prince's gaze held his. And you will refrain from theatrical hints to amuse yourself. Lenoir's mouth tightened. Your Highness mistakes me. I do not, the prince replied. Maître Caron closed the folder. Madame Fournier will not appear at your bureau. You have what you require. Lenoir bowed slightly. As you wish. He glanced once more toward Madeleine, then to the Comtesse, as if ensuring every seed had been planted. Then he withdrew. When the door closed, the Comtesse exhaled sharply. So, it is true, the marriage was invalid. Madeleine's voice came out thin. Yes. The Comtesse's gaze pinned her. And you still placed yourself in this house. Madeleine's spine stiffened. I did not know with certainty. The Comtesse's lips pressed together. Uncertainty is enough to keep a woman cautious. The prince's voice was clipped. Enough! The Comtesse looked at him, indignant. Etienne, you cannot pretend this is nothing. People will whisper, they will look at your daughters, they will wonder what sort of household. The prince stepped forward. Then they will wonder. The Comtesse's eyes narrowed. You would risk their future for sentiment. His voice lowered, steady. I would risk discomfort for justice. The Comtesse's mouth tightened. Justice does not host dinners. The prince replied, Then perhaps dinners are overrated. Juliette made a small sound that might have been a laugh, then covered it with her hand. Celeste watched the Comtesse steadily. Will you try to send her away? The Comtesse's gaze flicked to the child, then softened by a fraction, as if reminded she was being observed by innocence. I will try to protect you, the Comtesse said. Celeste replied calmly, We do not feel protected when you make her small. The Comtesse's throat tightened. You are children, you do not understand. Juliette's voice was clear. We understand loneliness. The Comtesse went still. The prince spoke softly but with finality. My aunt may disagree. My aunt may worry. But my aunt will not rule my household. The Comtesse's eyes flashed. And what will you do, Etienne? Keep her here as a compromise that pleases no one? Madeleine's breath caught. She turned her face away, shame burning. The prince's voice turned quieter. No compromise. Madeleine looked up. The prince's gaze met hers. For a moment, the Comtesse and the twins and the whole world seemed to fall back, leaving only the weight of his attention. Madame Fournier, he said, you have been judged for a deception done to you. Madeleine's throat tightened. That does not change what people will say. It changes what I will say, he replied. The Comtesse's brows lifted. Etienne. He did not look away from Madeleine. You came into my life through my daughter's foolish courage. I intended only to be proper, only to be distant. And yet, in a single day, my house has been less cold. Madeleine's chest tightened so sharply she could barely breathe. The Comtesse's voice turned sharp. Do not be ridiculous. The prince finally looked at his aunt. His gaze was steady, unyielding. I am not being ridiculous. I am being honest. Then he looked back at Madeleine. I will not keep you here as a secret, he said. I will not allow you to be a convenient employee dismissed the moment gossip grows loud. If you remain, you will remain with protection that cannot be questioned. Madeleine's lips parted. Monsieur le Prince. His voice softened but did not weaken. I ask you to marry me. Silence struck the room. Madeleine's hands went numb. The twins tightened their grip on her fingers. The Comtesse stared as if she had misheard. Etienne. No. The prince did not glance at her. Yes. Madeleine's voice shook. You cannot ask that. Not for this reason. For this reason, he corrected gently. And for others. Her throat tightened. Others? His gaze held hers. For you have dignity. You have steadiness. My daughters trust you, and I... He stopped as if words were harder than law. Juliette whispered fiercely. Say it. Celeste whispered softer. Please. The prince drew a slow breath. I have begun to look for you when you are not in the room. That is not duty. Madeleine's eyes filled again. She shook her head, desperate. You do not know me well enough. I know you refuse pity, he said. I know you protect children not because they belong to you, but because they are children. I know you have been hurt and did not turn cruel. Madeleine swallowed. And if society tears me apart anyway, it will tear you with me. The prince's voice was steady. Then I will be torn doing what is right. The Comtesse rose, trembling with controlled fury. This is madness. Juliet looked up at her, calm and bright. "It is love." The Comtesse's mouth tightened. "You do not know love." Juliet's voice did not waver. "We know when father breathes easier." Celeste added, "We know when Madeleine smiles without fear." The Comtesse's eyes flashed, then softened unwillingly at the sight of the twins' certainty. She looked at Madeleine, and for the first time her voice lost its sharpness and gained something like reluctant seriousness. "If you marry him," the Comtesse said, "you will be watched forever." Madeleine's voice came out small. "I am watched already." The Comtesse held her gaze. "Do you truly wish to bring your shadow into their light?" Madeleine looked down at the twins' hands on hers. She felt the warmth of their faith. She felt the prince's gaze like a promise that did not ask her to beg. She lifted her eyes to him. "You are offering me your name," she whispered. "I am offering you my life," he replied. Madeleine's breath shook. "And if one day you regret it," the prince's voice was quiet, unwavering, "then I will regret it honorably." Madeleine's throat tightened until it hurt. She blinked hard, trying to see through tears that would not behave. Juliet squeezed her fingers. "We already lent you our father. Now we will share him properly." Celeste nodded solemnly. "With vows." Madeleine let out a small broken laugh through tears. "You two are impossible." Juliet looked pleased. "Yes." Madeleine's voice finally steadied, though her cheeks were wet. "Monsieur le Prince, Etienne." He did not correct her for using his name. He only waited, still as stone, as if he feared a single movement might frighten her away. Madeleine drew a slow breath. She felt shame, fear, relief, and something tender she had not allowed herself to name. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. "I will marry you." Celeste released Madeleine's hand only long enough to pull 2 pale ribbons from her pocket, placing them carefully into Madeleine's palm, as if sealing the promise with the only authority she trusted. The ribbons lay in Madeleine's palm like 2 quiet commands. She did not know what frightened her more, the relief of being chosen, or the certainty that choice would be tested the moment it became public. Prince Etienne did not let the room drift back into argument. He moved with the same controlled calm he used for treaties and obligations, as if tenderness also deserved order. "We will proceed properly," he said. Comtesse Hélène's voice was tight. "Properly." Maître Caron bowed slightly. "Then we begin at once. Announcements, contracts, and the final registry clarifications." Juliet looked up at her father, solemn and bright. "We should tell the chapel." Celeste nodded. "And the cook." The Comtesse closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. "First, we tell no one until I understand what danger you invite into this family." Madeleine's throat tightened. "Comtesse, I do not wish to endanger anyone." "You do not wish," the Comtesse replied, "and yet wishes do not stop gossip." Etienne's tone turned cool. "Then we will not rely on wishes." He turned to Madeleine. "You will rest this evening. Tomorrow Maître Caron will bring you what you must sign. And tomorrow," he added, voice lower, meant for her more than the room, "you will not walk alone." Madeleine tried to smile. "I am beginning to suspect I am not permitted to breathe alone either." The corner of his mouth shifted, almost a smile. "You may breathe as you please." Juliet leaned in, whispering to Celeste with the seriousness of a minister. "He is smiling," Celeste whispered back. "He is trying not to." The Comtesse opened her eyes. "Enough. Mesdemoiselles, go." The twins rose at once and both turned to Madeleine before leaving. Juliet held her gaze. "Do not be frightened. We are very stubborn." Celeste nodded. "And we are on your side." When the door closed behind them, the room felt strangely bare. Madeleine stood with the ribbon still in her palm. She was aware of her wet cheeks. She was aware of the Comtesse's gaze, sharp and heavy. She was aware of Etienne's steady attention, as if he had decided not to look away from her again. Maître Caron cleared his throat. "Your Highness, I will require the names of any acquaintances of the deceased man, any addresses, any letters, any—" Madeleine spoke softly. "I have one." They all looked at her. Madeleine's fingers tightened around the ribbons. "A note was left for me, in the gardens. It named him. It warned me." The Comtesse's eyes narrowed. "And you kept this to yourself?" "I was ashamed," Madeleine replied, "and hated the honesty of it. And afraid no one would believe I was deceived." Etienne's voice was firm. "You will bring the note to Maître Caron." Madeleine swallowed. "Yes, Maître Caron nodded. This will help, not because the threat proves guilt, but because it proves pressure. The Comtesse's mouth tightened. Pressure does not erase disgrace. Etienne's gaze snapped to her. It erases the lie that she sought this house. The Comtesse held his gaze, then looked away as if refusing to be moved by anything so inconvenient as compassion. "Very well," she said. "Proceed with your papers, Maître Caron. I will not hinder you." A pause. "I will merely watch." "Comtesse," Madeleine said, voice low, "I do not ask for your affection. I only ask that your gaze not become a blade." The Comtesse looked at her sharply, then said, not unkindly but not warmly, "You speak well for a woman in danger." Madeleine answered, "I learned it by being in danger." That night, when the household quieted, Etienne asked Madeleine to remain in the small morning room near the library. The servants withdrew at a sign. No music, no grand confession. Only a room, 2 people, and the choice that had already been spoken aloud. Madeleine stood by the window, hands clasped tightly. "You may sit," Etienne said. "If I sit, I will think," she replied. "And if you think," he said, "you may decide to flee." Madeleine's throat tightened. "I still might." He nodded once. "Then let me speak before you do." Madeleine turned toward him. "Speak." Etienne's voice was controlled, but something in it had softened as if he no longer believed tenderness was a weakness. "I did not ask you to marry me out of pity," he said, "and I did not ask you because my daughters wished it. They were the bridge. They are not the reason." Madeleine's fingers tightened. "What is the reason, then?" He hesitated, as if he disliked putting his inner life into words. "I have lived for years inside rules," he said. "Rules for the household, rules for my name, rules for grief." Madeleine's voice was quiet. "Rules do not heal grief." "No," he agreed. "They only keep it silent." Madeleine swallowed. "And silence is not peace." His gaze held hers. "You arrived in the rain, and my daughters did something I would never have permitted if I had been thinking like a prince." Madeleine tried to smile, but it trembled. "They lent you." "They did," he said. "And in the time since, I have seen my house change, without anyone losing dignity." Madeleine whispered, "You risk your dignity by standing beside me." Etienne's expression tightened. "If my dignity cannot survive honesty, then it is not dignity. It is costume." Madeleine's breath hitched at the bluntness of it. He stepped closer by a careful pace, still not touching, still respecting the space she seemed to require to feel safe. "I want you here," he said, "not as a secret, not as an act of charity, not as a temporary remedy for my daughters, as my wife." Madeleine's voice broke. "And if the world refuses to accept me," Etienne replied, "then the world will learn to accept my refusal." Madeleine let out a small laugh through tears. "You say that as if the world obeys." "I do not need the world to obey," he said. "I need you to know you will not be abandoned for convenience." Madeleine's hand rose, then fell again, as if she did not dare to reach for what she wanted. Etienne noticed. His voice lowered. "May I?" Madeleine looked at him. "May you what?" He held her gaze steadily. "May I take your hand?" The simplicity of the request made her chest ache. "Yes," she whispered. He took her hand with careful gentleness, not possessive, not hurried. His thumb rested lightly near her knuckles, as if he were learning the shape of trust. Madeleine's breath shook. "I do not know how to be safe." Etienne's voice was quiet. "Then we will learn." The days that followed were brisk with papers, visits, and the polite machinery of society. Maître Caron moved like a man who understood how to fight without raising his voice. He requested parish entries. He obtained sworn statements from clerks who remembered the false documents. He traced the deceased man's true name to other victims and made it clear in neat legal language that Madeleine had been one of them. Monsieur Lenoir returned once, invited this time, and his politeness was tighter at the corners. Maître Caron spoke calmly. "Your report will reflect that Madame Fournier was deceived and pressured. It will reflect that her presence in Valmont was not contrived." Lenoir's smile was thin. "I am not in the habit of writing fiction." "And yet you hinted at it," Etienne said from the side of the room. Lenoir bowed slightly. "Your Highness, I regret any distress." Madeleine looked at him steadily. "You did not regret it when you caused it." The silence that followed made Lenoir's eyes flicker. Maître Caron's tone stayed even. You will file the clarifying addendum, monsieur. Lenoir nodded once. It will be filed. After he left, Madeleine exhaled, as if she had been holding her breath since the garden bench. That is it, she whispered. Maître Caron corrected gently. That is the legal beginning of it. The Comtesse, who had watched every step with sharp eyes, surprised Madeleine by speaking without venom. You were deceived, she said. Madeleine held her gaze. Yes, the Comtesse's mouth tightened. I dislike being wrong. Juliet, who had been perched in a chair with perfect posture, replied sweetly, Then you will have practice. Juliet, Etienne warned, but there was no heat in it. Celeste looked at the Comtesse with solemn sincerity. Will you stand with us now? The Comtesse's throat tightened. She looked away for a moment, then back at the twins. I will stand where I must, she said, and then, as if the words cost her pride, I will not let you be mocked for loving someone honorable. Madeleine's eyes stung. Comtesse, she began, but the older woman lifted a hand. Do not thank me, the Comtesse said. My tenderness is not elegant, it would embarrass us both. Juliet nodded. Very sensible. The engagement, once decided, was not announced with fanfare. Etienne chose a small afternoon gathering, enough witnesses to make it real, not enough to turn it into spectacle. The Comtesse attended. Her presence alone quieted certain whispers before they could become bold. Still, whispers existed. Madeleine heard them like distant insects behind fans. She saw eyes that tried to measure her worth in the cut of her dress, in the steadiness of her voice, in the way she stood beside a prince without clinging. One woman, a marquise with a pleasant smile, said, How fortunate for you, madame, to have found such generous protection. Madeleine's cheeks warmed, but she did not lower her gaze. Before she could reply, Etienne spoke, calm and precise. Madame is not protected by generosity. She is honored by choice. The marquise blinked. Of course, your highness. Juliet murmured to Celeste, loud enough to be heard. She does not like being corrected. Celeste replied. It is good for her. Madeleine squeezed the twins' hands lightly under the edge of her sleeve, a silent plea for mercy. Juliet looked up at her, angelic. We are being merciful. The wedding was arranged with dignity, not excess. A morning ceremony, a quiet reception in the Valmont home, the sort of elegance that did not beg for applause. In the antechamber of the chapel, Madeleine stood with Madame Renard adjusting a final pin at her collar. The housekeeper's severe face softened by a fraction. You are trembling, Madame Renard observed. I am breathing, Madeleine replied. Madame Renard's lips twitched, nearly a smile. Breathe steadily, then. Madeleine swallowed hard. Do you think I will shame them? Madame Renard's eyes narrowed with disapproval, not at Madeleine, but at the thought. You have already been shamed by lies. Today is for truth. The door opened, and the twins entered in matching dresses, their faces solemn with ceremony. Juliet walked straight to Madeleine. You look properly grand. Celeste nodded. Not grand like a statue. Grand like a person who survived. Madeleine's eyes filled instantly. Juliet took her hand. Do not cry. Madeleine gave a shaky laugh. I will try. Celeste looked up, very serious. You may cry if it is joy. Joy is allowed. Madeleine knelt briefly so she could meet their eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Juliet leaned in, whispering with the urgency of a conspirator. If you faint, I will catch you. Madeleine laughed softly. You are small. I am determined, Juliet replied. Celeste added, and father will catch you too. Madeleine stood again, breath unsteady. The Comtesse appeared at the door, her expression strict, her eyes bright in a way she would deny if accused. Madeleine, she said, and it was the first time she used her name without edge. Stand straight. Madeleine straightened. The Comtesse's voice lowered. Do not look at the room. Look at him. The room is fickle. Madeleine's throat tightened. Yes, Comtesse. The Comtesse cleared her throat as if annoyed by her own emotion. And do not apologize with your eyes. You have done nothing wrong. Madeleine could only nod. The music began. The doors opened. The chapel was not described by Madeleine's mind in details. She could barely see beyond the line of faces and the single figure waiting at the front. Etienne. He stood as if he had been carved into calm, but his eyes, when they found hers, held something that made her knees feel weak. Not possession, not triumph. Relief. She walked toward him with the twins just behind, as if they were escorting her into the future they had insisted upon. When she reached him, Etienne spoke so only she could hear. "You are here," he said. Madeleine's voice trembled. "I am here." His gaze held hers. "Do not be afraid." She managed a small smile. "I have been afraid for a long time." "Then be afraid with me," he replied, "not alone." The ceremony was brief, solemn, proper, vows spoken clearly, names placed where they belonged, the union made lawful in the only way society could not pretend away. When the words were done, Etienne offered his arm, and this time Madeleine took it without flinching. Outside the chapel, a few onlookers watched, as they always did, some with curiosity, some with grudging respect, some with the disappointment of not getting a scandal. Juliette lifted her chin and looked at them, as if daring them to disapprove. Celeste smiled quietly, satisfied. Back at the Valmont home, the reception remained gentle and controlled. No grand speeches, no theatrics. Yet the joy, restrained as it was, felt louder than any orchestra. Madame Renard supervised the household like a general who had decided peace was worth defending. Servants moved with extra care. Even the curtains seemed less heavy. Madeleine found herself in the morning room again, briefly alone, as if the house had returned her to the place where fear had once sat beside her, like a second body. The door opened softly. Etienne entered, closing it behind him. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Madeleine's voice came out small. "Monsieur le Prince." He stepped closer. "Not today," Madeleine swallowed. "Etienne." He nodded once, satisfied, as if that single name was a door unlocking. "You did not run," he said. Madeleine's laugh was soft. "I tried many times, in my head, and yet you stayed," he replied. "Because your daughters," Madeleine began, "and because you chose," he corrected gently. Madeleine's eyes stung. "I chose, yes, but I still feel as if I will be punished for it." Etienne's face tightened, then softened. "If anyone tries, they will answer to me." Madeleine looked down. "I do not want battles." "Neither do I," he said. "I want a life." He took her hands as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Madeleine exhaled shakily. "What if I disappoint you?" Etienne's gaze held hers. "Then we will speak, not punish, not withdraw. Speak." Madeleine's voice broke. "I do not know how to be loved without fearing it will be taken away." Etienne lifted her hands and pressed a quiet kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so restrained it felt sacred. "Then let it be taken from my cold hands," he said, and his voice was steady enough to make her believe him. A knock sounded. Juliette pushed the door open without waiting. "We have a request." Celeste followed, perfectly composed. "A family matter." Etienne sighed, but there was a softness in it. "What is it?" Juliette announced. "We must go to the gardens." Madeleine blinked. "Now?" Celeste nodded solemnly. "Now. It is important." Etienne glanced at Madeleine, as if silently asking whether she wanted to escape the world for a moment. Madeleine surprised herself by smiling. "Very well," she said. "Let us go." They walked out together, not hurried, not hidden. The servants watched with quiet approval. The Comtesse, passing in the corridor, paused and looked at them as if memorizing the sight, for the days she would have to defend it in other drawing rooms. In the gardens, the air was cool but clear. The paths were damp from earlier rain, and Madeleine's heart gave a strange little ache at the memory of herself on that bench, alone, and convinced the world would swallow her without noticing. Juliette led them straight to it. "There," she said. Celeste nodded. "The beginning." Madeleine stopped in front of the bench, as if it were an old witness. Etienne looked at it, then at her. "This is where—" "Yes," Madeleine whispered. "This is where I fell apart." Juliette corrected immediately. "This is where we found you," Celeste added, "and where we decided." Madeleine let out a soft laugh. "You decided without permission." Juliette looked proud. "Yes." Etienne's gaze moved to the bench, then back to Madeleine. "Sit," he said, gentler than before. Madeleine sat. She smoothed her skirt automatically, then stopped herself. She did not need to look perfect on a bench anymore. Etienne sat beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed hers, and she did not pull away. The twins climbed onto the bench too, pressing in on either side as if sealing the space into a single unit that could not be broken. Juliette leaned her head against Etienne's arm. We kept our promise. Celeste leaned into Madeleine's shoulder, carefully, as if asking and answering permission at once. We did not lend him any more, she said. We gave him. Madeleine's eyes filled. You gave me a family. Juliette lifted her chin. We gave father a heart that is not locked. Etienne's voice was quiet. I had a heart. I simply forgot how to open it. Madeleine turned her face toward him. And now, Etienne looked at her with a steadiness that made the world seem less threatening. Now I will practice, every day. Juliette reached into her pocket and produced the 2 pale ribbons now tied into neat bows. We brought these. Celeste nodded. They are for a promise. Madeleine touched them, smiling through tears. A promise of what? Juliette said it as if it were obvious. That you will not disappear. Celeste added softer. And that father will not become stone again. Etienne's mouth tightened with emotion he tried to master. I cannot promise I will never become cold, he said. But I can promise I will return to warmth when you call me. Madeleine whispered, and if I am afraid? He replied, then you will tell me. Juliette looked satisfied. Excellent. Celeste's eyes shone. Then it is settled. Madeleine laughed softly, wiping her cheek. You two settled everything. Juliette leaned closer to Madeleine as if confiding a secret. We only started it. You finished it by saying yes. Madeleine's throat tightened. She looked at the bench, the path, the simple fact that she was not alone. Etienne's hand found hers again, steady and warm. Madeleine breathed in, then out, and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Safety, not as a gift, but as a shared decision. And if anyone listening to the world ever doubts this kind of ending, Madeleine's life would answer without raising its voice. Humiliation does not get the final word, because dignity can rise again, and love, when it is chosen with courage, becomes a home no gossip can evict you from. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.